Hi, my name is Donnie Gardiner Bartley, and I'm going to use this video to present a rough draft of a story and a set of stories and subjects, but the story of my involvement in ayahuasca and the first Santo Daime ayahuasca church in the United States in 1989. It was in Cambridge, Mass. And the persecution by the US government in 1990 of myself and my roommate at the time, Rex Bynum. We were both arrested after Rex picked up about 10 gallons of ayahuasca from the airport, May 21st, 1990, and I took the day off from work and just happened to stop by one of the places that we were staying. We had two apartments, him and his fiance at the time. We were all sharing these two apartments. Stopped by his apartment in Cambridge, Mass. Rex just pulled up from the airport and said, "Oh, Don, it's incredible you just pulled up." And he and I started unloading crates from his trunk, and about dozens of federal agents with guns came running from every direction in Cambridge, Mass, screaming, "Federal agents down on the ground." I won't scream like they did, but it's very dramatic. "Federal agents down on the ground, down on the ground, federal agents." And Rex and I got down on the ground, and I'll tell more of that story. Glastonbury, Connecticut. My parents were never married. My mother was Leanne Leslie. My father was David Gardiner. They're both no longer in this world. And when I was born, my mother was married to my stepfather, Don Bartley. And I was born from Glastonbury, but I was born on a US Navy base in Argentian, Newfoundland. I spent the first 2 months of my life there, and then came back to my hometown, Glastonbury, where my family's been since the 1600s, some lineage of my family. I'm going to talk about ayahuasca. I was involved in the first Santo Daime church in the United States, 1989, Cambridge, Massachusetts. A group of us, and I was a member of that group, met. It started in like 1988, and I was involved in meetings preparing to go to these ceremonies. And in 1989, I think on January 2nd, 1989, I participated in my first meeting in Chestnut Hill in an apartment with a bunch of people. And it was a very beautiful experience. Maybe I'll say a little more about that in a bit. And in 1989, the group of us formed the church. And we had some members of our group who didn't consider themselves members of our church group, but just came to the ceremonies. And some of those people went and started their own church later on. One person in particular named John started a church 10 years later in Oregon, and he has his own story. So the rest of the story that I'm going to get to after a little more details is the persecution against our group by the US government, which was when we were arrested on May 21st, 1990, and then the case that actually resolved in January 1991. With the full acquittal, the case January 1991 on the grounds that Rex and I had no criminal intent, that we were practicing a religion. That was Judge Skinner's ruling. That was his words. Finding them not guilty on the grounds that they had no criminal intent and they were practicing a religion. And that was a precedent that was jotted down and later used in other cases. But we'll get to that. So, okay, so I just going to briefly just touch on ayahuasca, history of ayahuasca. What is it? Where does it come from? Just a very brief history of what I know about the Santo Daime tradition. Mestre Ireneo is a man who started the Santo Daime tradition. I'll tell that what I know about that in a little bit. It's in Brazil. And then in the 80s, a lot of Americans, few Americans, mostly from the Boston area and from a couple other places in the country, were going to Brazil and involved in the Santo Daime church traditions down there, and then brought back the ceremonies to the United States. And the group I was in was one of the first groups. There was a group in LA with a man named Russell and his wife, and I forget his wife's name, but they had a group and they were very serious. I met them, haven't seen them in decades. There was a group in New York City, Terry and her husband, and I'm forgetting his name, but they were fond of the Santo Daime people and the tradition, and they had some ceremonies in New York City and helped to facilitate some there in New York City in the 80s, 88, 89, and then 90. And then I'm going to tell a little bit of the relative details about my story leading up to the types of condition that I was in that brought me to healing and spiritual seeking, that I found healing and spiritual insights with the Santo Daime. So I'm not going to tell my whole life story, but I'll tell a little bit about that, and then I'll talk a little bit about the case. So first of all, I also want to say that I speak for myself and nobody else speaks for me. The only person that speaks for me is my wife, Lauren, but there isn't anybody else in the Santo Daime or any tradition that I've been involved with or anywhere that speaks for me. I speak from my experience and my understanding, and I speak from my own history and the way I see things and understand things. I might speak about some people, how I see things, but I'm not speaking for them, I'm speaking from my perspective. So I just want to make that very clear that I just speak for myself when I'm telling you the story and my understanding of Santo Daime and Ayahuasca and other traditions that I've been involved with. So Ayahuasca is a tea, comes from the Amazon. It's thousands and thousands of years old. And I remember in the early 90s there was an article I read about an archaeological find in the Amazon that dated this find 23,000 years ago, and in this article it said that they found remnants of the use of ayahuasca and art and cups and various things, and this particular archaeological find theorized that 23,000 years ago they were using ayahuasca in the Amazon. And I guess I've come to understand that mainstream archaeology doesn't even accept that people were there in the Amazon then, so it's controversial. But the people that I've met from the Amazon, Siona people and others, they hold the position that they've been there in the Amazon for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they've been using this, I guess, technology of ayahuasca medicine and many other plant medicines for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So at the very least, the use of ayahuasca spiritually, religiously, and for healing is older than any Western religion. It's older than Judaism and older than Buddhism. I'm not exactly sure how old they can trace back Hinduism, but ayahuasca is at least as old, if not older. And then I'll just say about religion, the word religion comes from Latin languages to reunite, realign, and it's in our English language religion. We think of churches, we think of Christianity, Judaism, we think of Islam, Buddhism, these types of things. We call those religions. But these cultures over here, they had their own languages and their own, psyches and framework, and their languages and practices are just as valid as the people that came out of Europe and the Middle East. We're striving in this world to make that bridge of respect for all of humanity, rather than just comparing ourselves and the lineages we come from as the gold standard. Frankly, there is no gold standard. It's mysterious. There's a lot to learn. So let's just say ayahuasca was a religious practice in the Amazon for many, many, many years. It's made from a vine, and I think they call it Banisterius caapi, and a leaf. The leaf might be called that. They call the vine jagubi. It's one thing. They have many names for the vine and the leaf, but there's certain vine and certain leaves that they use to make ayahuasca. And there are other mixtures with different leaves, and there's people that in the Amazon that put tobacco in the ayahuasca. And the ayahuasca that I've had and been involved with in Santo Daime in Colombia, it's made from a vine and a leaf. And it comes from the Amazon. So the Santo Daime tradition came about, I think it was like in the 30s, the late 20s or the 30s, when a man named Raimundo Ireneo lived. He was a forest-dwelling black man of African descent, and he was a rubber tapper. And what I was, the details that I learned is that he became very sick, and the doctors that he was seeing and the medical people couldn't help him, and they advised him to go find the indigenous people and see if they could help him. So he found some indigenous people, and he had some kind of a cancer of the liver or something that, I don't know. It's what I've heard, different things. Basically, I'm remembering cancer of the liver, so very, very serious, life-threatening, cancerous illness. And he found these indigenous people, and they didn't even speak the same language, but they gave Raimundo Ireneo, they gave him ayahuasca, and they gave him a lot of it, and they kept working with him, and they formed a communication that was without language, since they spoke different languages, but they helped Raimundo Ireneo to heal from his sickness. And he was so profoundly moved that he became an ayahuasquero, a healer. That's what they call the people who practice ayahuasca. Ayahuasqueros, a person who heals with ayahuasca and who facilitates it. So Raimundo Ireneo is the first or the most important bridge between indigenous people in the Amazon and their tradition with ayahuasca and the rest of the world of the Brazilian people. And he had a Christian background before he went and got this healing, and so in his psyche he already had some kind of a relationship and a belief in Jesus Christ and Mary, Mother Mary, knew the stories, and during his healings he saw Divine Mother and believed that he was being healed by Mary, and also believed in Jesus and believed that he encountered Jesus in his healings, and many other forest beings. There's a forest being in this work they're called Jarema, and I'm pretty sure Jarema is a word that comes from the Amazon people. There's another one, Janaína, and there's other ones of beings that, spirit beings, healing beings that are there in the Amazon or here on this planet for us to make connections with. And in these the use of plant medicines in the Amazon, a lot of traditions consciously form connections with these beings. So Mestre Ireneo formed the first group of his community, and he started working with people, and around him a community group formed, of non-indigenous practitioners, forest people who got healing and also started getting spiritual teachings. And what I understand is he started to get songs, these beautiful songs, and all these ayahuasca ceremonies, songs are usually a part of the ceremonies and part of the people who practice, and the elders in the communities. Are songs that are passed down, and then people also receive songs from the universe, from creation, And Mestre Ireneo received many songs initially, and what I understand is he and the people that he worked with, when they would be healing people, they wouldn't sing the songs with their mouth, they would just telepathically sing the songs in their head while they were giving people ayahuasca, and they were doing that to support the healing. Their belief was that they weren't the healers, that the medicine was the healer, and that a person who seeks healing comes to the medicine and works with the medicine and the spiritual beings that they encounter, and then learns how to heal themselves and how to ask for healing from the divine forces. That was my understanding of the main practice of Mr. Ireneo and the people that worked with him back then. They didn't consider themselves as laying hands on healers or come to us and we're going to figure out what's the matter with you. Through their own experience of healing, they facilitated ceremonies that helped other people to be in the presence of the medicine, of the spirits, and they held the force based on their strength and their maturity and their responsibility and experience and their eldership as they grew. And so they sang these songs telepathically amongst each other, and they really opened up their telepathic way of communicating, so they could be communicating without using language, and they were doing that for a while, is what I was told. And then things evolved, and they started to sing these songs in ceremonies, with their groups. And they had a bunch of different groups in the Amazon, in the area of Boca do Acre, along the Purus River, and I've been to Boca do Acre, but in Rio Branco is over there as well. So in those areas, like a few hours apart, Rio Branco and Boca do Acre, they had communities in that region that were non-indigenous ayahuasca communities. And I think today there's a lot of communities there, indigenous and non-indigenous, and some of them are rooted in Mr. Ireneo, and others are rooted in indigenous peoples and traditions. So there's another church in the United States called the União de Vegetalista, UDV Church, and I understand that their roots go back to Mr. Ireneo's work of being a bridge between the indigenous people and bringing that medicine into non-indigenous Brazilian people. So I only have a limited understanding of the UDV history, but I have been told that much about their connection to Mr. Ireneo, Raimundo Ireneo, who became known as Mestre Teacher Ireneo. So that's all I'll say about that. I'll say a little bit more. I've been to Colombia, and I've spent time with Siona elders, and the leaders of the Siona elders are called Taitas, and Taitas in their language translates into English something like loving father of the community of the people. And these Taitas lead ceremonies. They apprentice and learn for many, many years about plant medicines, not just ayahuasca. They call their ayahuasca yahe. But I met some Siona elders, and one in particular named Taitawan Yahuare, Taitawan Jaguar, who's no longer in this world, but I got to meet him in 2004, and I think I saw him again a couple years later in Colombia, and learned some good things from him. And from him I learned that that nobody can appoint themselves as a leader or a taita or a padrino. He wanted to make sure that I understood this, that you're only a taita or a padrino if other people consider you a taita or a padrino. You don't just appoint yourself as one. That was a very good discourse that I got from him. That was something that really concerned me, and he psychically kind of knew that, told me that, so I'm very appreciative of Taitawan Yahuare for that and many things. But he also shared that, how many thousands of years old that this ayahuasca tradition is, and he had a loving respect for Santo Daime and all people who use medicines in a good, respectful way. So, aho to the Siona people and all the people in the Amazon where these medicines came from. I want to make back up to there. We have Santo Daime, we have Americans that went down there, but it all came from indigenous people in the Amazon who held this for thousands of years, and in this last century, it's opened up to the rest of the world. So there's a lot to talk about in that, but that'll be the subject for other talks. Okay, so when I came to the Santo Daime, it was in 1988, a friend of mine named Jamie, who was Rex's fiance. She had been a friend of mine in my circle of friends for years, but I ran into her in 1988, I believe it was. After knowing her, but I reconnected with her at a gathering of friends who had a weekend getaway at a friend's house. We used to go and hang around, spend the weekend at a friend's house, have music and just be together, and sometimes party a little bit and all that, you know, people from Boston area. But I met her, and I had just, in 1987, I had survived a suicide attempt that was a culmination of a lot of trauma that started in early childhood. And Jamie, I was telling her about, she was an acupuncturist and, you know, in the healing arts, and she had gotten involved in Santo Daime, and we just got talking, and I shared, you know, my story, and I'm recovering and just trying to take care of myself and get well, and she shared with me a little bit about Santo Daime and opened the door for me, said, you know, if you want to learn about the use of plant medicines this way, you know, you're welcome to come to our group and learn about it. We've brought some of this medicine back, and we're sharing it with people, and just trying to see if we can have like a point here in in the United States. And back then it was Cambridge, Boston. So I already had in my psyche a desire to learn about the use of plant medicines, and it wasn't just something she brought up and just kind of like, you know, like, have you heard about plant medicines? So, at any rate, it was like a calling in me already. And over the year 1988, I went to some meetings and pondered on it a lot, and there was some ceremonies I was invited to, and I wasn't ready, and I waited until I was ready. I said, I'm definitely going to come, but I'm not ready yet. I'm going to come when I'm ready. And those ceremonies took place in 1988 in Boston, Cambridge, and then January 2nd, 1989, I went to my first one, and my story took off. So the traumas I experienced in early childhood, my mother was married to my stepfather, and I had, you know, I wasn't his son, but I was named after him, and, you know, they were teenagers. So at any rate, they had another son named John, and then my mother got pregnant with her third son, Jeffrey, and while she was carrying him, I was probably 3.5 in South Glastonbury, Connecticut, and he was, Don Bartley Sr. was in the Navy and coming home, and one time he had come home, and, you know, we were just playing, my brother and I, and just innocent little children, and he was very angry and violent, and put a knife to my mother's throat, and then had a gun, and looked at me this way, and then went out in the backyard, shot it, and then he left, and I don't remember ever living with him again after that. I have talked to him a few times since then, but basically that was the end of our family. And being 3.5, I didn't even have language or understand anything that was going on, but that made an incredible traumatic wound in me that took me many, many, many decades, you know, 40, 50 years of working with this medicine and other things to understand what that did to me and how that shaped my whole life. And my mother then got together with my second stepfather, who I'm very close to now, and he's been my father since I was, you know, 5 years old. But back then he had grown up in a very violent, disciplinary, violent home, and that's how he was. He was, you know, as a young, they were in their 20s, they were just very violent, a lot of violence. So there was a lot of that foundation of trauma from violence in my early childhood and growing up. And by the time I was 15, I just left home, you know, just a couple weeks before I turned 16, I left home, and I I went to see a guru. This is in 1977. I turned 16 in 1977, but in August, just before I turned 16, I ran off with a bunch of friends, went down to the Poconos, saw a guru that was about my age, a couple years older than me, and got involved with this group, which actually saved my life. And I ended up living in an ashram for a while, learning about an ancient practice that came from India that they call knowledge of the self. And I've come to learn that it's also called Raj Yoga. I lived in an ashram for a while, which was very healthy for me, but very weird for 1970s American culture. And that was good for me. That saved me from where I was. Prior to leaving home at 15, there was a lot of drugs, alcohol, suicide attempts, just tough stuff, really, really unhappy. So that was my foundation of life. After I was on my own, living in the ashram and off and on, I had periods of self-medication and periods of being well. And leading up to about 1986, I was having a difficult time, and I had a very serious suicide attempt and a near-death experience. And I'm going to tell that story later, but this is pretty much saying all this now because this is who I was and where I was, a person that was spiritually seeking yet really, really damaged. And when I came to the Santo Daime, immediately I was just touched in the deepest way. So before I get into the case a little bit, I'd like to just tell a couple of stories about some of my first ceremonies with Santo Daime. The very first ceremony was in Chestnut Hill, January 2nd, 1989, and my friend Rex led the ceremony. Jamie, his fiance, co-led it with him, and there was a group of people, a man named John, and Marilyn, a whole bunch of people who were in the group for a while from the Boston area, and they came. Constance, a few other people, I think Lucia, Lynn. So we were, they very graciously welcomed me. We had it sat at a big table, and everybody at that ceremony, except for me and maybe one other person, had been to Brazil and had experienced these ceremonies. And it was very nice of them to welcome me in. And so we sat at like a big giant dining room table with a white tablecloth, candles, and beautiful pictures of like mother and, various pictures, saints. I think a picture of Jesus, and they had a cross that has like a double cross. And, at that time I was struggling to clean myself from self-medication, and I was doing good a lot, and I kept having slips and then doing good for the previous couple of years. But one of the things that I was seeking is strength in cleaning myself up from this party lifestyle that I was involved in, and self-medicating and thinking that fun was this party thing that was very strong in the culture in the 80s. So, and prior to taking the ayahuasca, whenever I did use any kind of a substance, I didn't have any kind of a shut-off valve. I would just dump anything into my body until I dropped or whatever. And it's part of the condition that I have. There isn't a shut-off valve. And it's one of the reasons I don't do those things anymore. I worked for many years to clean and come to terms with those things. But with this is relevant. I'm telling you this because it's relevant to my first ayahuasca experience. Rex gave us a glass of ayahuasca. We all took it, and then we sang some very beautiful songs. And they had prepared some books. And they sang the songs in Portuguese because they hadn't translated them yet into English to sing them, but somebody had tried to write down what they mean in English on another page, and we were able to have this ayahuasca, and as it took effect, to see the songs that they were singing and then see what they meant in English. And the ayahuasca was very strong. I started to feel a familiar change in my consciousness, and The song sounded very, very beautiful. And actually Rex had some of his own songs in English, and they were mostly about the Divine Mother and Divine Feminine and healing. And as the night went on, I just, in this first ceremony, I very strongly felt the presence of a very incredible, beautiful, loving mother who just loved me so much. And that mother showed me, she said, look at every woman here. And I looked and said, see, I'm in every woman's face. And then she was talking to me and said, look in every man's face here. I'm in every one of them too, every one of those people. And I did. I looked around at every single person, first at all the women, and I saw this beautiful mother, and I heard her saying, I'm in here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. So the night went on, and then Rex offered people more ayahuasca, and this is the part that's relevant to what I was saying before. I was so moved by my experience, and it was so strong and profound and real, and I just respectfully said, no, I don't need any more right now. Thank you, this is enough. And I just had that first one glass of ayahuasca all night, and that was enough. And it wasn't anything in me that wanted more and give me more. It was so profound and powerful. It was more powerful than anything I had ever done. And it began right after that next week. I just felt I woke up feeling so inspired. And my thought was, that was really, really beautiful. I don't know if I'll ever go back, but that really, really was good for me, and I really feel good. And I had not been really working for a year steady. I was just floundering around and doing odd jobs, carpentry and little odd jobs here and there. That very week I went out and I actually got 2 part-time jobs. One at a freight company where I loaded trucks for a well-known freight company, and the other one at a college. A friend of mine got me a part-time job answering phones for college. He had worked there for many years on the switchboard, and they had been looking for people, and he had been telling me, we can get you in there. And then I finally followed through. I was so inspired and so grounded after that ceremony that I just took these 2 jobs and just started working. And I also, in that ceremony, I saw how it looked like inside of myself there was like other beings that really weren't me, but that were talking to me, telling me, hey, use this substance, or go out and party and hang with these friends and drink. And I saw these guys, and in the ceremony I just said, just go away. You're not welcome here anymore. And I heard that voice of that mother telling me, they don't have any power over you. You're stronger than them. You just tell them to go away, So that was one of the most profound things that happened in the ceremony. And that week, like I said, I was feeling very inspired and got 2 jobs, felt like really invigorated, and like there's nothing in me that's going to tell me what to do that's going to be bad for me. And I just was like a new outlook on life. And so I just went ahead working and feeling really strong. And then my friends told me, hey, there's going to be another ceremony. And something in me just said in the moment, without thinking ahead, or because I had this thought, like, I don't know if I'll ever do that again, because I have my own spiritual beliefs that I learned from the ashram and from the guru and from India, and I think, I'm kind of anchored into that, and I don't know if I need anything else on to join any other movement, but I'm going to go back again. It was just right in the moment, wasn't thinking anything long term. So I went to another ceremony, and this one was in Cambridge. My friend had a healing studio where they did polarity healing and they saw clients at the studio it was on Mass Ave, way down, almost to Arlington. And we had very beautiful ceremonies in there. And the next one, we took more medicine, and this time I took, 1 dose and a second dose, and there was more people there, very, very nice people from Boston that were invited, kind of like me, that knew their friends had gone to Brazil and they were thinking of it. And there was a lot of professionals, a lot of healing professionals. There was lawyers. There was a couple of doctors, and I was probably the youngest person there, the struggling young person that was just stumbling along trying to find their way into maturity. But they were very nice and accepting of me and supportive. So we drank our ayahuasca, we sang our songs, and I had incredible visions of apparitions. And there was another room, and they had said if you need to go through a process or go purge, I'll describe that in a second. You can leave the table and go in this room and go through what you need to go through, compose yourself, and come back. And people will check on you, make sure you're all right. They had these people whose role it was to be guardians to make sure you're okay during a ceremony when you're going through stuff. So I ended up in that room, and I think I might have vomited, because that happens with ayahuasca. And other traditions, we call it getting well, not getting sick, but getting well. So I was getting well in a bucket. And the whole time during this second work, that again was the presence of that mother talking to me. It was so close. And I think before I went to purge, I was just sitting there and hearing her voice and feeling her presence, and I just started weeping, saying, "This is my mother. My mother is real. I have a mother. Like a divine, a mother that's bigger than anything." And I just feeling this incredible love that is so profound of the purest, most beautiful mother and powerful mother. That's who it is. And I heard her voice, and in front of her, just feeling myself in her presence and acknowledging her, I just started weeping. My mother, my gosh, And I started to think about my own mother, I'm going to come back to that in a moment too. I went into the other room purging, and then I just looked up, and right in front of me was this apparition of a beautiful, beautiful mother. And she was just right in front of me, 2 feet away, talking to me, looking at me, and telepathically talking right into my heart and telling me, "I am your mother. I am the mother of everything, everyone." And then she turned into a dragonfly and said, "I am the mother of these, and they are your relatives." And then she turned into like a deer, and "I am the mother of all these, and they are your relatives." And then she turned into other animals like a bear, and plants, many different animals. She kept saying, "I am the mother of all of these, and they are your relatives." And then she told me very specifically, she said, Mary, the story of Mary, is just one of my stories. There's many, 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 many stories and times that I have lived here in this humanity. And Mary is one story of many, 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 many. I am the mother of all. I'm the divine mother. And I was just watching her, and in my heart, down my solar plexus, and my whole being was just being cleansed, and just feeling just taken care of and loved by my mother, and receiving her knowledge. I am the mother of all these, and these are your relatives. I am Mary, but that is just one of my stories, only one. There's many, 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 and humanity doesn't even remember. So that touched me so much, that second work. And then I went to one more after that with the same thing. I don't know if I'll go again, but that was one of the most powerful things I ever felt. And I went to one more and had another experience like that with the presence of the mother. And I just realized, whatever this is, this Santo Daime, this ayahuasca, this tradition, this mother, whatever this is, I think it was the third or fourth, maybe it was the third one, I saw her again, and she had this beautiful star. She was holding a star like this beautiful giant 6-pointed star, like gold. And she held this and she said, "I want you to take this star, and I want you to follow me for the rest of your life. Take this star. This star is a connection between you and me, and follow me for the rest of your life." So I found out that in this tradition of Santo Daime, people who committed themselves to the tradition, they said, I want to be committed to this tradition, and they received a star that they wore in the ceremonies. And that was my experience of wanting to receive the star and wanting to be connected, was when my Divine Mother held the star and said, take the star and follow me for the rest of your life. Serve me for the rest of your life. Acknowledge me, do my work for the rest of your life. So I ended up realizing that I felt completely committed to whatever this was, this healing work, these sacred medicines, and this Divine Mother, who was the mother of everything, you know. So that's how I became involved in Santo Daime in that 1989, early 1990. And then I talked to Rex and Alea. They had already received their stars, and I said, I want to receive my star and be committed to this. And they didn't tell me, I didn't even hear the word fardado or uniform or anything like that. I knew that they wore certain clothes, but when we spoke about it, it was about, you know, your own personal calling and you answering your own personal calling. And that's exactly what my experience was. When I was spoken to and blessed to be in the presence of my mother and have her appear in front of me in the form of a woman, change into different animals and insects, and show me many, many things about the realities of that we're all related and that we have a Divine Mother. That's when I became committed, and that's when I took a star, and that's what that star means to me. I've over the years, other people have had very different experiences and call it something very different, but I don't ascribe to any of that. I just subscribe to my personal experience with my mother, who held a star out and said, serve me for the rest of your life, spend your life serving me. So recently, it's 2023, I haven't been in any Santo Daime groups, but I'm still spending my life serving my mother, and I will until I leave this life. And I'm quite sure that before I came here, I was already doing that as well. And there's more detail I can tell in other stories about growing up during the 60s and 70s in this culture with equal rights, and understanding that as a child and as a young boy, what that means and how important that is, and that I was here to make it, to be a part of making that a reality. So the Santo Daime and the spiritual teaching of the Santo Daime for me has to do with mother, grandmother, and I've come to learn over all these years. I've heard other stories from other cultures of indigenous people way up north, the story of Isis, you know, myth stories, or just stories, ways of teaching ideas or perspectives. And these stories talk about a great mother of all that encompasses male and female. And that mother first gave birth to her own husband, the first male, you know. And I actually believe that that is how creation is. It's a mother, and within mother, that mother contains the father. So what comes first to me, and what will until I leave this world and beyond, is mother comes first before anything. Divine Mother, Divine Feminine. That's how it was for me in 1989 into 1990, and it was in October of 1989 when I was in a ceremony in Santo Daime, and I'm pretty sure that I was the first person in the United States in a ceremony to receive the star in a ceremony in the United States. There was people in our group that had their stars and were in ceremonies in Brazil and received them. But I know that I'm the first one in Cambridge. We're the first church, and I know that one of the leaders gave other people stars that didn't even ask for them, and that could have been in New York, or that could have been in Brazil. I'd heard it was in Brazil, but pretty sure that I'm the first person that received the star in an ayahuasca Santo Daime ceremony in the United States. And that means something to me, and why I'm even telling the story and the place that was given to me. So that was my foundation, a little bit of my traumatic need for healing that brought me to the Santo Daime and my spiritual search. Living in an ashram, always being a spiritual searcher. I even studied comparative religion since early teenage years on my own. I read scriptures and just tried to understand what was being taught by scriptures myself. I didn't belong to any religion, and my family didn't have any religion when I was there. After I left home, my parents started going to a church, and they had their own path. So we were in, after that October time when I received my star, we had many ceremonies. We were at church. We were feeling really positive, like this is such beautiful healing. I was living with my friends Rex and Alea. We had 2 apartments. We were just going along, having works, and feeling like we're working together, and that what we're doing is really good. And I saw films of people that had leukemia and tumors and cancers in Brazil, crying and weeping and describing their healings. And I just became more touched and more convinced of how real this was. And my only experience were the ceremonies in Boston, Cambridge, and we went down to New York City and did some with 200 people in lofts in New York City. And it was always all beautiful, all very beautiful. So we were going along, and then my friend Rex, excuse me, was the leader. He had met with some leaders in Brazil, a leader named Paulo, and then he met with a leader named Padrinho Sebastião, who was the elder of the Santo Daime at the time. And Rex was sharing very beautiful things with me. He talked to Padrinho Sebastião, and Padrinho Sebastião gave him permission and blessings to go back to Boston and to have a point and see if it evolves into a church. They called their groups points of light, And Padrinho Sebastião gave Rex a lot of encouragement and personal direction. And Rex came back to Boston, Cambridge, and this is after I had gotten involved. He went back to Brazil once or twice, and he came back and said I was with Padrinho Sebastião, and he just gave me all this beautiful time and direction and encouragement. And in January of 1990, we had a very beautiful ceremony. Part 2, continuation. The last part was a introduction to leading up to the story of the case in 1990 that started May 21st, 1990, where the federal agents came and arrested Rex and I. So I left off in the introduction talking about Rex meeting Padrinho Sebastião, who was the oldest living elder and the most famous living elder of the Santo Daime tradition. And Padrinho Sebastião, from what I heard, also had sickness like Mestre Ioneo, and he went to Mestre Ioneo's community to get healing. He was a forced person, like a mixed breed rubber tapper for a person that just from the population lived way out there in the forest in that area, Boca do Acre, Rio Branco, forest people, But they were non-indigenous or mixed breed. They had some mixed in the Brazilian people with the indigenous people. And I had heard that Padrinho Sebastião was very, very sick too, and he went to Mestre Ioneo very much like Mestre Ioneo went to the indigenous people. And he got, they gave him ayahuasca and had the ceremonies with him, and Padrinho Sebastião had those experiences of with the divine beings and with the Divine Mother and Mary and Jesus healer, Jesus teacher, and all the people that, like Mestre Ioneo and the other ayahuasqueros that were supporting. And Padrinho Sebastião got healed from his physical, life-threatening illness. And then he became an ayahuasquero too, and a community leader. And so I got to go out there to the Amazon, to Mapia, where Pedrinho Sebastião lived his last years. The whole community had moved there a few years before. And that's a whole nother story that I'll tell another time, but about the community itself of Mapia, and about things that went on where they had to move there, and even about my own visit there. So back to this story here about my coming to the Santo Daime Ayahuasca, receiving incredible healing experiences and getting committed. And Rex had met Pedrinho Sebastião, received blessings and instructions and, encouragement to come back to Boston and continue trying to share the ayahuasca that they called Santo Daime with others. And that really touched me, hearing that from Rex. This is like when I was first took my star, and in those few months between October and January, or could have been just before, when him telling me this, going down there and meeting him, was really beautiful, because I could feel how loving and what a good person Pedrinho Sebastião was. And I knew some of the songs, we sing a lot of their songs, very beautiful, So we continued having these ceremonies, and it led up to January 1990, January 1990. We were all in a ceremony. It was a special holiday for the Santo Daime. They have certain holidays. They call them official works, official ceremonies. They have a calendar. And one of these days in January, we were all dressed in white, and in these white uniforms that we wear on these special holidays. And we were singing these songs and dancing and having incredible healing. And really, a lot of people had been to Brazil, and people were really into what we were doing. We had been going for about a year, and right in the middle of the night, we were all, we did a certain dance back and forth, 4 steps one way, 4 steps the other, and we sang the songs, and it was like a way to hold a current. And that dance itself is rooted in very ancient dance ceremonies that came from the Amazon, So we were dancing and singing these songs in the middle of the night. Like a whole bunch of us just felt something just go whoosh up, And we were like, what was that something? I don't know. But the next morning, I was back at home with Rex and Elaine, and where we lived together, and Rex had gotten a phone call from Brazil, and then he told me, Don, just got word that Pedrinho Sebastião passed away last night, right in the middle of the ceremony. They were doing the same ceremony in Brazil. And he said, yeah, remember when we all just felt that big whoosh? And it was one of the most profound things I ever felt, dancing, doing the sing, and all of a sudden a big whoosh. So it just taught me about the connection that we have with one another, especially doing these kinds of things together. There was a lot of things where people we met in New York at ceremonies had been at like some healing conventions in Boston, and we saw each other there, and there was even pictures of everybody together, but nobody knew that next week we're all going to be we're going to meet up again in this healing ceremony. Like, oh, what a coincidence, but it's not a coincidence, It was one of those periods of life where a lot of the synchronicity. So I'm getting to the case, and there's a couple more things I want to let you know about. Santo Daime, they call their medicine, this ayahuasca medicine, Santo Daime. And Santo Daime in the Portuguese language, Santo is holy, sacred, and Daime is give me. So Santo Daime is asking. It's like holy asking, it's sacred asking, sacred prayer. That's what the Santo Daime work is. Santo Daime work is a sacred asking for healing, asking for teachings, asking for awakening, asking for forgiveness, asking for guidance. Holy, give me, We're imploring the divine, the spirits, the medicine, the creation that we receive from. All the powers that be, we're asking, please give me strength, give me love, give me guidance, give me healing, please. That's why we call this Ayahuasca Santo Daime. That's how it came about. And Mestianero called the church the eclectic center of the universal flowing light. And I heard that early on in my first, ceremony I went to, and then the subsequent ceremonies, and like, eclectic. Okay, I know what that means, but okay, that means something. Eclectic, not like this way, one way, the only way. It's like a eclectic belief, a collective perspective, eclectic spiritual practice. That made a real impression on me, and it has that perspective of eclectic has been very important to me since 1988 till now. It's 2003 in my practice with different medicines, and even I became a lay Buddhist, and I want to be humble. I don't know a lot about Buddhism, but I learned a little bit, and that's another story. But I did ask to receive some teaching so that I could learn about Tara, Manjushri, and some other Avalokiteshvara. These are teachings that the Tibetan Buddhists give without requesting a huge commitment like other Tibetan practices. And I'm not looking for a huge commitment. I'm just looking for those practices so I could be closer, and then all the things I can learn, the teachings. So I consider myself a lay Buddhist, and there's some things I don't agree with and some things I do, but I call myself a lay Buddhist, and I do some practice. And that's part of my eclectic way of life. I've been involved in the peyote churches as different ones. The first Dakota medicine man that I met told us about the Native American church, but he also told us he had his own church separate from the Native American church. It was called Church of the Morning Star, and he was incorporated and registered with the government in the same way that the Native American church was. He was the first Native American person to share peyote with me and my friends. And some friends of mine had invited this man to the Massachusetts area, Boston, Cape Cod, and then they had kind of lost interest, but they asked me after I got involved with this medicine. They said, "Hey Don, maybe you can invite this guy up, and have some ceremonies, because we don't have a place to do it." So we did invite this man, William. He's no longer in this world, but he was a Dakota medicine man, he called himself. And once I asked him if he was a shaman, got mad at me and said, "We don't use that word." And I kind of don't really like the word shaman, but people have used it, and even in South America they use it now, so it means something to them, but it's a word that comes from Asia. This Dakota medicine man in English called himself a medicine man. He told me, "I'm a medicine man," Anyway, I'm blessed to have been involved with that Church of the Morning Star and those ceremonies, and then I've been welcomed and blessed over these past 30 years to be involved and welcome to some Native American church ceremonies, and I've done quite a few of those. And I'm also blessed to have been able to be in some ceremonies with Huijoli elders from Mexico, and those are the people that hold peyote where the peyote came from. And their peyote tradition also is older than Judaism. It's about, they believe it's about 7, maybe 8,000 years old, and Judaism is about 5, just under 6. So the use of peyote in Central America by the indigenous people there religiously and for healing, it's older than Judaism, and another plant medicine. I don't speak for them, but I speak from my experience with them, and I will speak about it. I will speak about my experiences in the sitting in teepees with William, calling his church the Church of the Morning Star, and I will speak about some of my experiences in Native American church ceremonies and other ceremonies with, I have a very dear brother named Danny who does ceremonies with a fireplace, a very special fireplace. And I'm not representing them, but I have experiences in there. And as I share more in videos like this and writings and story, however the story comes out, I will definitely talk about those things and from my perspective and my experience and about my story and them, my understanding, not representing them. So that eclectic thing and that Santo Daime, Holy Give Me, these are important things to me, you know, and to what the tradition of this bridge. Santo Daime is a bridge between pure traditional ayahuasca and yahe use and then the Western world, you know. So, you know, Rex came back inspired, and we had we were a church. It was I can use the word like nobility. It's like we didn't think egotistically we're so noble, but it was very noble. Like, but this is an incredibly real, pure healing, and we're waking up, and I'm getting healed. I'm getting psychologically healed. I'm getting healed from trauma. I'm getting healed from substance abuse. I'm getting healed from things holding me back from maturing, and I'm getting healed from being stuck where I can't even work. Getting healed, and we can just share this with others who want this. There's a nobility in it. And that's another thing I've learned over these years. We have a lot of songs that talk about nobility, nobreza. And it's not about ego. Like and our egos want to be noble, but the nobreza, the real nobility comes from goodness, comes from being aligned with purity, with goodness, with mother, and with father, you know, mother, heavenly father, all the different ways you can say it. Some people don't even like to use the gender. It's okay, you know. In Buddhism, they teach that, from what I understand, all beings have male and female, and all the bodhisattva beings, at the very end of their service to this realm, this world, this earthly realm, they remain behind in their female forms because that's the form, the compassionate form that it remains behind to help others. So I mean, it's just that same myths way of teaching everybody about the divine feminine and the divine mother, and you know, there's divine masculine, divine feminine. It's all really part of the same thing, but somehow in our time, things have been really oriented to like a dysfunctional male way, maybe for thousands of years, and that really needs to shift for humanity to heal. So after that time with Padrino Sebastian, we kept having our works, and we were just sharing with people. People were coming to our works, our ceremonies. We called them spiritual work. And and then on May 21st, it was a Monday, and I was doing some painting, and I had my job at the college. That became a full-time job. The boss there, my boss, I asked if they could make a full-time position for me so I could go to school, because it was a benefit of full-time employees, and she was just so gracious, said, yeah, I'll make a full-time position for you so you can have this benefit. And I just been in my first classes. I dropped out of high school in 1977 when I left home, and got a GED, tried going back to school in the early 80s, and it was a lot of money and I wasn't ready. So working at the college, I started going back to school, and we were doing our ceremonies, and life, a lot of nobility. Life seemed good, you know, and so I've cut this part out. Hold on. Okay. So then was on Monday, May 21st, 1990. I was at our apartment in Jamaica Plain, and I woke up, and I was supposed to go do some painting, on the side. I had my normal college job, and I was doing and that was like a night shift. And then I was doing some painting with a friend, and I just decided, I just want to take the day off, and just have some space. I felt like I'm going to give myself a personal day, I'm not going to go do some painting, even though they need me. I'll go tomorrow and I'll finish up my part, So I got up and I had breakfast at this little cafe that was called the Blackbird Cafe right across the street from the apartment I was in, and I went and had breakfast. And the funny thing, the person who served me was telling me about somebody they knew who was an activist, a Native American activist, and that they were being held in a federal prison. She was just telling me the story, and they were raising money, and they just supported this person. And it was just out of the blue. She's just sharing the stuff with me, and I didn't really think much of it, but except that, I was concerned about the story. But it's kind of funny, on that day, it just happened to come up. And I went somewhere in my car to go do something, and I heard some music on the radio, and I heard a song, really beautiful song that was just putting me into a real relaxing place. And I think the song was "It's Just My Imagination." For some reason, I was just relaxing and grooving on the song. And then I decided, I'm going to go to the music store and see if I can find that on a cassette tape, because I had a cassette tape in my car. I drove 10 miles to this music store, and I didn't find it. And on the way there, I'm thinking, what would happen if I did something, if I went to work today and I didn't do this, And then I remember in my car, and I stopped and I let an older woman who was just driving slow, and I stopped and let her go, and somebody beeped at me, and I thought to myself, what would happen if I didn't stop and let her go? Like, where would I be? Would everything be different? I was having these thoughts, on this day, May 21st, and I don't know why, but it was like, for some reason, it was almost like somebody was putting some force was putting these thoughts in me, and making me really pay attention to them. And then I ended up over in Cambridge at the Rex's apartment, and where I stayed a lot. And I was going to do some work writing letters. We were trying to raise money for the people in the Amazon. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to write some letters, fundraising letters, And so I pull up, and then Rex is there with his car, and there's these 2 crates sticking out of his little car, like a little Datsun or something he had. And he's like, oh, Don, just in time, And I go, oh, Rex. And he said, yeah, they cleared the shipment. They had been waiting for this shipment to get cleared. They were holding it up. And it was the ayahuasca, 10 gallons or so, 10 or 15 gallons in these big plastic containers, 2 crates, wooden crates, So he's like, oh, I need some help carrying it in just in time. And I go over, I go, oh, good. It's amazing. I just happened to take the day off. So here, we pick up, we go to grab things, but I look over and I see this van, and there's these guys in this van looking at us, and the doors are opening and closing. And I'm like thinking to myself, who's that, And so we pick up the crates, and then all of a sudden, dozens of guys with giant guns come running down from every direction. Federal agents, down to the ground, federal agents. And we're like looking, and I'm thinking, who are they talking to, And then they're coming closer, and all the guns are standing around us, pointing guns at us. And I look at my friend Rex, and he was blue. I've never seen a human being turn blue, but Rex was blue, and I must have been blue too. And we just got down, like face down, right in the street, and then these 2 of the agents put handcuffs, and they were really rough. One guy slapped the cuffs out, and they go, "This is what you get for having long hair." Rex and I both had long hair. Rex was, I think he was practicing Sufism, and I just had long hair because I always had long hair and tied back. And I think it was, this agent's name was Agent Consavage, and he was like, "This is what you get for having long hair." And inside of me, like, I can't believe, what an awful thing to say, And then we stand up, and then we're standing there, and then there's like dozens of people around with the guns, and they're all, and like, God, this is driving me crazy. Do you guys do this every day? I mean, this is, what is this all about? And they're like, yeah, that stuff you got there, And then I'm like, wait, this is I started saying stuff like, this is our religion. We have a church. This is a healing tea that we use, and we even asked the FDA if we could bring it in. We gave them a sample. We asked them, is it okay if we bring this into the country? And they told us, yeah, it's fine. They checked it, tested it, and said, you can import this. And, Rex was careful. He was making all the arrangements, and he thought, I'll go ask them. And he brought a sample to the FDA, and they said, yeah, we don't see any problem. They told him, they tested it, and they said, it's not poison or anything, you can have this ship. So, and there was some lawyers in our group who would advise Rex to do that, I think, So here we were standing there with handcuffs, and these dramatic federal agents that were screaming at the top of their lungs with guns, like giant guns that were pointing at us, and they had us in handcuffs standing there in the street in Cambridge, and I started saying something like, what are you guys doing? I was really mad, and I was only 27, 28 at the time, and I was mad. I was like, what are you guys doing to us? What do you think you're doing to us? How dare you? And this is a religion from Brazil we're practicing. And then one guy's like, and then one person said, well, is this anything like peyote? And I said, yes, it's like a peyote church, because I knew they had peyote churches. I had never been around them, but I knew that they had them. And when he said that, and I said, yes, standing there in handcuffs in the street, I felt this hand on my shoulder. And then I heard this very beautiful voice say to me, and they spoke to me like this. He said, grandson, I'm right here with you. And he said, this medicine's my sister. We're relatives. This is going to be a fight, but we're doing this together, and we're going to win this fight. And I look, and there's nobody there, And I'm hearing this beautiful voice calling me grandson, telling me that this medicine is his sister, and that they're relatives. And right there, standing in the street, handcuffs, and he said, don't ever let anybody tell you that this medicine, that we aren't relatives, and that it's different. We're a family, we're together, and this is our fight, and we're gonna win this fight, and you're part of it, And I'm like, okay, standing there in the handcuffs, had no idea what's going on. I had never been around Native people. Years later, I got involved in peyote religion and Native people, and I have some Native heritage in my Yankee colonial settler lineage. I also have 3 grandparents, 5 generations back, have Native, and one of my Native elders' name was Henrietta Porter, and her father was given papers and told his name was William Smith, and his father's name was Josiah something. So they were Mohawk, we know that for sure. And then my mother's father doesn't know what people, our family doesn't know what people he came from, but his grandmother was Native and French, and that meant a lot to my grandfather. And that's another story I'll tell later, at another time. That's how I got a small identity to Native American from my grandfather during the Wounded Knee Up thing that happened in the early 70s. I was like 11, 12, and my grandfather, I was with him alone, and he started crying, and he said, Donnie, I don't want you to ever forget your Native American heritage. And I'm like, what? I'm just a typical white kid, Scottish, English, and I'm like, Native American heritage? And my grandfather's crying during Wounded Knee, and at 11, 12 years old, it changed my life, because I'm like, I'm not just white. I have a different ethnicity. It blew my mind to think, because the way we're conditioned about race, and colors, and just thinking that I'm not just a white person, that I have also non-white heritage. It blew my mind, And I grew up since then with that identity, and I've met Native people. They get mad because they're like, oh, you're not Native, and you didn't grow up like us. I don't claim to be any more than just my grandfather being very proud and telling me that his grandmother was Native, and that means I'm white, and I also have some Native American, and that's my family lineage and experience. And that's part of the story too. That's part of why my place and my mission, and I was given this place and this role, to be a person that got arrested by the federal government, put in federal prison and tried and then acquitted, found not guilty, and then continued on to be a bridge, I was given a name by a sister of mine who was a Cree grandmother in a special ceremony, a naming ceremony they have in lodges, sweat lodges. And I was in a special lodge, a Bear Clan lodge, and then she gave my sister, she's my sister, she gave me the name that who gives you your name is your relative. And she gave me my name, and my name is Rainbow Eagle of the Bear Clan. And the reason it's Rainbow, she was told to tell me the reason that my name is Rainbow Eagle is because it means mixed breed children. And she was raised from her grandparents. She didn't have to live on a reservation. Grandmother Diane, she lived in the bush with her family, and her father and grandfathers and grandmothers were practicing medicine people, preserving their Cree tradition. And she told me that some of the prophecies she knew is that in this time there would be mixed breed children who would be part of helping to restore sanity and true spirituality and true ways, who would be helping, So it's definitely my role, and everybody has a role. Everybody in this world is important. Everybody has a mission. Everybody has something. But I have my place. We have all our songs. They say, know your place and stay in your place, And I have a place that was given to me, and that place was to be exactly who I was, traumatized, born in 1961, self-medicating, mixed breed lineage, coming to this medicine way in the first ayahuasca church in the United States, getting arrested by the government that my lineage actually founded, the colonial settlers. I'm related to people that wrote the Constitution of the United States directly. I'll get to that, back to that in a minute. And my place was to be here in 1990 in Cambridge, involved with the ayahuasca and arrested by the government, and then acquitted, and then continuing on, meeting peyote people and meeting other people, and then meeting my sister who had the naming ceremony and told me and my ceremonial name is Rainbow Eagle of the Bear Clan. That is my place, and all the ceremonies I've done, at a certain point, I had to just stand up in a place of responsibility and give this medicine to other people in ceremonies. And I did that for a while. I'm not really doing that anymore. I'm retired from that kind of trying to have a community and share medicine with people. It's for others to do now. And I'll only do that privately with relatives right now, going forward for the rest of my life. I'll only go to where I'm safe, where I'm welcome and respected as an elder, and where the people who are serious and safe. I won't go to any other ceremonies or support any other kind of ceremony that goes on in the United States or anywhere in the world, except for high integrity and genuine, respectful people who are holding the space and respecting each other, respecting others. So anyway, standing there like that, this peyote grandfather that I realized right then, he's calling me grandson. I knew this is peyote that's talking to me, calling me grandson, and that just like the works that I had that just went, just like when the mother was talking to me, in the way that it just cleansed my inside and just expanded everything in me, standing there in handcuffs in Cambridge on the street and having that spirit talk to me and call me grandson and say what he did. And he said, don't ever let anybody tell you that we're not together, that we're not relatives, that that's my sister. You're going to hear a human being say that, and they're wrong. And I've come to learn that a lot of people say a lot of things about peyote and medicines, and inside of me I say, well, if you ever heard the voice of a grandfather and grandmother He would never, ever, ever say that to anybody. He would never say that this medicine's good, that medicine's bad. This tradition's good, that tradition's bad. Anybody who says that is very far away from the truth and from the actual medicines themselves, because the medicines don't say that. The spirits, the peyote grandfather, the ayahuasca grandmother, the peyote grandmother, the white corn grandmother. And so I was blessed also to be in Wajoli ceremonies that were some of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever been in. So standing there in Cambridge, Massachusetts on May 21st, with those agents and kind of disrespectful, and hearing that beautiful grandfather spirit call me grandson and tell me that this medicine, I've never heard the term medicine. I didn't know that ayahuasca was a medicine. Never heard anybody really. They didn't talk like that, even though maybe somewhere it had been crossed my mind. But this dialogue that came from that spirit, grandson and medicine, it is the way that people talk, and I had never heard that way of talking before. Some of the agents were like, I was like, what are you doing to us? And one of the agent looked at one of the main guys and said, yeah, why are we doing this, right? And one of them goes, yeah, but there's direction from Washington to do this, right? And it's crazy, I'm standing there, and I just kept expressing, upsetness, like, what are you doing to us, that we're practicing religions. Like, I just couldn't believe it, So they brought us into the apartment, and then they were just like around, like doing all kinds of activity. There's guys outside, and we're in the apartment in handcuffs. And somebody who was in our church group was an older woman. Her name was Maureen, and she's not in the world anymore either. But she was coming to some of our ceremonies, and she didn't have a lot of money, and so like to contribute, we had to contribute something for wasn't like a lot, but something for buying the medicine and stuff like that, and getting everything there. There was like, people had to contribute. So she bartered. She was making tapes of the music, and that was like her contribution. Like, go take this tape and go make like 10 copies, and like, all these tapes, so people can then like get the tapes and then listen to the songs and practice and learn the songs, that we're singing in these ceremonies. So she comes to the door, and all these agents are there, and we're there in handcuffs, and she's looking in, and the agents are there, and she's got this bag, and they go, I'm looking for Rex. And they go, oh, well, he's busy now. He's not gonna, he's not available. And we're like there, and she can see us in handcuffs. And she's like, well, here, and she gives us the bag. And Maureen was probably in her mid-50s, maybe pushing 60 at the time, I don't know. But she was like an older woman, and it's just amazing that they didn't like arrest her too. Like, oh, you showed up here, so we're arresting you. It's just, okay, and they took the bag. We'll give them the bag, and then she left, And bless Maureen, she's wherever you are, Maureen. So that night they took us off, and handcuffed, and then we spent the night in this Boston. Some jail in Boston was the most disgusting place I'd ever been. It smelled, and people wrote with human feces on the wall, and it seems like they purposefully didn't clean it. And I was just in there like, oh my God, this is disgusting, like I'm locked up in here. This is like freaking serious, and in this disgusting, gross place that smells with human crap on the wall. And somebody wrote on the wall, like something like a quote, some quote about Jesus being, the messenger or something, and kind of made an impression on me. Like, here I am sitting here, and there's this thing. And then there was another kid. They had arrested a kid, probably was my age or something, and he was being all tough like an inner city kid, and they got him down and get in that cell, and they got him in, and they closed the cell, and they left, and then the kid just started weeping, and it just made an impression on me, just the suffering, And the next morning we got brought from this disgusting Boston jail, to the federal courthouse, in Boston. And we were locked up in there, and a friend of my family's was an FBI agent. He's retired now, but he works there every day, so I don't think he came that day. He came later because he didn't know. My mother didn't know about this whole situation for a few weeks, But anyway, we were in this Boston cell, and I can see in the mirror, like the next cell, and I see all these famously known like organized crime guys, and I'm like, oh my God, like where are we? I look and I say to the guard, is that so and so, like the crime boss guy? And, yeah, right. And I'm like, Jesus, Rex, where are we? And then we're in one cell, and we're in there, and then we go into the court, and then the magistrate judge was just all angry and just, you're held, We weren't even charged with anything. You're just held, and then we're, later on, we left and we're chained. Me and Rex are chained to these mafia organized guys, and we're going in this van, and Rex and me we're crying. Rex is crying, oh my God, we're crying, and then they turn around and they go, you'll be all right, kid. I mean, I'm not in any way advocating the organized crime, but those guys were nice to us and comforted us, and we ended up going to Danbury Federal Prison, and we were in this unit called Unit 11, where they keep you before you've been, gone to trial, and we're in the next cell from all these organized crime guys, and they were nice to us, right? And I kind of look back and see that it was some kind of a blessing, because people thought that we were their friends and nobody bothered us, because it's a rough place in federal prison, I mean, other prisons are worse. I guess this was Danbury, and it was whatever, but I'm not a prison expert, but I was there in Danbury prison being held without any charges, and it was pretty heavy, So while we were there, we were on that unit, and they didn't let us go out for like a week, and it was like late May, but then the guard, Rex and I were in the same cell for a while. I was there for just under a month, and Rex was there for like a month and a half. So for the first little bit of time, Rex and I were in the same cell, and the guards came over and said, okay, you two guys, you guys can go out in the yard. They didn't let us mix in people who weren't convicted with the population or something like that. And they just let us go out into this big courtyard all by ourselves and just walk around, and it was like freezing. And Rex and I are just walking around kind of shaking, and it was May, but it was a cloudy, cold day. It had rained, but the sun wasn't really out. It was like a cold. We're walking around, and we're like, oh my God. And I'm walking around the yard. We did a couple of laps, and we were scared, I mean, like, what's going to happen to us, and I'm thinking in my head, I got to know my father, my biological father, David Gardiner, in my 20s and then onward, and then he would go on about our family, and some of our family wrote the Constitution. They were all colonial settlers, and I'm walking around the courtyard like, what about religious freedom? I'm like, what if I really have ancestors that actually wrote the Constitution? Why am I in this federal prison? This isn't right, and like, I'm walking around thinking this, I'm mad, but also scared, and we're shaking, and we were freezing. And Rex and I are like almost like leaning on each other, shaking and walking around this courtyard. Nobody else was out in there, and we felt this incredible, like a breath of heat. And I'm walking with Rex, and Rex and I both turn to each other, and Rex goes, Don, do you feel that? I'm like, yeah. And there's two angelic beings right over us, and they're breathing heat on us. And he's like, yeah. We both felt this heat and both perceived these two beautiful beings breathing this heat on us, because we were cold, man. And we were freaking scared, And these two beautiful beings came over and blessed us and breathed on us. And that month, just under a month that I was there, a bunch of things like that happened in there, like that is one of the most profound things that ever happened to me. And I can't, it's not even any doubt. It's like, my only thing is that people don't believe stories like this, but sorry, it's real, There is a peyote grandfather. There is a star being who calls himself Michael, or herself, itself Michael, and there's also Michael in our history, in our scriptural history, and many stories, the stuff that isn't even in our mainstream scriptures. Michael, and Gabriel. And I'll talk more about Gabriel later on, because I had another experience like that. But we're walking around in that courtyard, and these two beautiful angelic spirit beings came over, breathed on us, and you could just feel like protection and just blessing, and we're in this prison. And I was really mad. It's like my government that my family formed is locking me in a prison. I don't care if I have long hair. I'm like, I was pissed off, man. Like, this isn't right, and there's this isn't right. And then those beings, no, you're going to be okay, And another time, another thing like that happened there in that Danbury prison. Rex got moved to another unit, because I guess they thought he was going to be there, and there was a chance I might go or something, and so they moved him, and they weren't planning to let him out, I guess, and I had two other cellmates, one was a bank robber guy, and then another one was a cousin of all the organized crime guys who wasn't really active. He got in trouble, and because he was in their family, they put him in there or some kind of thing, This guy named Carl, very nice guy, and I'm glad that I met him and that he was my cellmate. We were like goofing around and laughing. But one day, after Rex was somewhere else, I was just out in the courtyard there, and the sun came out, and I just like smiled, and I had this jumpsuit, and I put the jumpsuit of the shoulders of the jumpsuit down, and I was just like letting some sun and going like this on the bench. And this guard came over to me, and he's like, really was nasty mean, and he just said, put that up, and if you ever sit out here like that again, you're going to go into the hole. And the hole was like on the other side of the wall from us. All night long, people are screaming. It was like an insane asylum. Like on the other side of the wall from our cell was these all night, like people going, ah! And it was like, oh my God. And it's like, I don't want to go to the hole. And I'm like, I was just sitting out here trying to get some sun, and this guy just came and like attacked me, like, like it was an attack. It was a psychic, awful, emotional attack. And I went back into the unit, went back into my cell, and I was laying I went into my bunk. I was on the top bunk, and I was just laying there shaking. I was freaked out. I'm like, God, and laying there like this, and I experienced laying there, I saw this jaguar just come down out of the sky, and it came through the bars, and it just came in and laid on top of me, I'm laying there, and I'm like, and it was just said, it was just pure protection and love. It was like this beautiful, a jaguar, I mean, something that you'd think would, if you ever ran into it in the woods, you'd think it's going to rip you apart. Comes down, and I saw it, and I experienced it, and I didn't make this up, this jaguar laid on me, and it just, more warmth and comfort, and it calmed me down, and so I kind of composed myself, but then later on I was really, really, really freaked out, and I'm like, I can't take this, and I'm like, this world, I don't want to be here. This world is so dark. If this is what it is, if you live in this world and you practice a religion, you do good things, and they throw you in prison, and this is what they do, and this is how this world. I already had all my trauma, and I had suicide, and I said, I'm going up to my mind, I'm going up to the top tier, and I'm going to jump off, right? And like the movies, they have those balconies of the 4 tiers. That's exactly how it was. Like, I went up to the top floor, like 4 or 5 floors up, and I put my hands on the railing, and I was going to jump off. I was just going to jump down onto the cement and to end my life, That's how I felt. I was just so much in despair and so freaked out. I'm like, this world is dark. You can have it. I'm leaving, And I put my hands up there and started to lift my leg, and I heard, grandson, take your leg off there. Go down, get back in your cell and get back in your bed. I told you it was going to be all right. And I just instantly, it was like my grandfather, and I just said, okay. And I went down and got into the bed of the cell, and that spirit talked to me, said, this is going to take a long time. This is going to take 20 years. And then it's going to be like, this will be legal in the United States, and this will be a practice. And you're a part of it. You're supposed to be a part of this, And I told you it's going to be all right. And he said it's going to take like 20 years before things change, And told me a bunch of things, But I believed him. And if I didn't hear that voice tell me, grandson, take your hands off there. I told you it was going to be all right. I would have jumped off, So that really happened to me, and that was my experience there. As it turns out, I got to the payphone one day after like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks of being there, and I called my mother collect just to let her know where I was, right? So I called my mother on the phone, collect, and she's like, oh, thank God you called, and Jamie had let my mother know what happened. I didn't know because we're in the prison, and she's like, I already I'm getting a lawyer, and we're gonna bail you out of there. And we had been back and forth a couple times, and our bail was set at $250,000 each, and without me even being in touch with my mother, when she found out what was going on, she just somehow completely jumped in and went and borrowed like thousands of dollars from a friend, and got me a lawyer, and put up a $250,000 bond. They gave the deed to their house to the government, and I was, after close to a month, just under a month, I was bailed out of. I was out on bail still didn't have any charges, but I was bailed out for a $250,000 bond that my mother just took upon herself to get together, and she got me a lawyer for like a $10,000 retainer to be represented in federal court, And then later, a woman named Marilyn, who was a member of our group and coming to the works, was very committed at the time. She put the deed to her house up to bail Rex out for a $250,000, and that's a lot, What Marilyn is also no longer in this world, but I just always have the greatest love, and I remember her love and commitment and the truth of what we were all trying to do, something good, So we got bailed out, and we were. I had to live with my mother. I was released to the custody of my mother, and I wasn't even allowed. The feds were telling me you can't even go out of the house, and then after they gave me permission after like a month to go out, and then I eventually went back to work, and I got my car and went back to work at the college, and I had to explain to them what was going on, but they were supportive. I said, I was practicing this religion, and it was a religious college too, but it's like my boss wasn't, she wasn't necessarily religious, but I explained what happened. And my friend Mark, who worked there, he explained too what I had been through, and they believed me. They're like, he was practicing this religion, and this is like a misunderstanding. So they didn't fire me. They said, we hope this works out. We support you. So anyway, I went back to work, and I had to drop the classes I was in. It was my first college classes that I got as a benefit. I had to drop them and then just wait until all this cleared up before I started taking classes again, which I eventually did. And then that's a whole nother story. So, I just worked and stayed at my mother's, and then I was allowed to go stay with some friends as time went on. And then we went to hearings, and we met with our lawyers, and my lawyer had worked for the magistrate who was heavy and set me in the first place, but I didn't know her at the time. My mother's friends knew this person who clerked for the lawyer for the magistrate before she became a lawyer, and then they hired her. Her name was Smith, the lawyer, and So anyway, she said she was talking to, like, the prosecutors and all that. And, oh, if there's any information you want to give, or if you want to testify against anybody, maybe they'll make some kind of deal with you or something. And I'm like, I said, there is like no deal to make. There's no testimony. And I actually said, you go tell those guys, shove it, blah, blah, blank, blankety blank and blank, I said, you just go tell them, go F, go yourself, that there isn't any deal or anything to make, that we're practicing religion, they're wrong, they shouldn't be doing to us, period, And she said, well, I'm not going to go tell them exactly what you said, but I'll go tell them that your position, And then even some people in our group, one guy was a lawyer, we all got together and he was like, don't say anything in front of Don or whatever. And I was like really offended him, like, we're not going to like turn on each other, And, I don't appreciate you like thinking that or projecting that. So we had dinner together and then we started spending time together. And then I told my lawyer, I want you to work with Rex's lawyer. And Rex got a lawyer that was a very, very famous lawyer who usually gets like $1 million retainer, but he was very supportive of this case. And so he basically did it for a retainer that was way less. And it was pretty much kind of a pro bono thing, but it still got asked for some money, but it was a fraction of what this man, Jim Lawson, usually got, And so he was representing Rex, and Rex was the main target, and I was there. I was a member of the church, and I was Rex's roommate, and then I just happened to take the day off when Rex picked up the shipment, and then we got busted together. So they wanted both of us, but they were looking at Rex like, yeah, you're like the guy, right? And and Rex was from Wales, and he had lived in the United States since like the 70s, and he really liked it. He's back in Wales now with Jamie, and they had a beautiful daughter who was grown, and they're doing well now. But back to this story here, I told my lawyer, we're working together, and then I asked Rex and Leigh, I said, I told my lawyer to work with your lawyer. We're together. We're not separate. We're not against each other or anything, and they agreed. And so we talked and we spent time together, and I was even in the presence of their lawyer a couple times, and then we had hearings and various things, and we got advice, So, we were just hoping that this would clear up, but we were scared, And the federal judge that was appointed to the case was Walter J. Skinner, and he was appointed by Johnson, I guess, and turned out to be a very fair guy, but excuse me. So Judge Skinner was, we were in hearings and stuff, and he was like, oh, the case of the Kickapoo Joy Juice, huh? That's what he was like, humorous. And we had a jury selection, and we had to be there, like, and they were picking a jury, and I'm like, this is getting more and more real. So then it came into January 1991, and there was the day of our trial, and I think I might have been staying with Rex and Leia again then. I wasn't staying at my mother's anymore. I was staying with those guys. We were all staying together, and we all went together to the court, and we got down there, and the courtroom was empty. There was just, Rex and I and our lawyers, and then these DEA and customs agent guys came in, and they had like wheelbarrows. They had like dollies full of boxes, and it was like a big show. They came in with all these boxes and put all these boxes, and they're all like official coming in and out. And then they all came in. There was like 6 federal agents, and then there was a prosecutor named Jeffrey something. I don't know. Not very fond of him. He wasn't a very nice guy, but anyway, he was the prosecutor, and they had a couple of prosecutors there. The judge came in, and my mother's sitting with me. But before the judge came in, they told Rex's lawyer, they said, look, Well, if you plead guilty to this, plead guilty to the charges, which is possession of dimethyltryptamine with intent to distribute, if you plead guilty to that, we'll recommend, instead of you guys going to jail for something like 20 years, which you could, for possession of dimethyltryptamine with intent to distribute, we'll recommend to the judge that you go to jail for like 5 years and that they drop the charges against, him, and that's me. And Rex is like, what? And then the lawyers that represented him said, it's up to you. And Jim Lawson said, I'm ready to try this case, but it's up to you. And the other lawyer that worked with Jim said, sometimes if you try a case and you lose, it's like you got to pay rent. You get, you have to do, if you fight and you lose, you have to do the time, and they don't like that, So if you could take a plea, it's up to you, but if you take a plea, the judge might agree with their recommendation, or he may not too, so you never know. And it turns out that this judge was notorious for when anybody pled, they didn't accept the recommendations. He usually gave people like maximum sentences, and the prosecution and the agents, they knew that. We didn't know that, but anyway, Rex decided, all right, I will plead guilty. They're going to let Don off. I'll go to jail for like 2 to 5 years, right? I mean, it was a crazy, all this time he was what we had gone through and what we were thinking we were going to go to jail for 20 years. And we're like, are you kidding me? We're practicing a religion and you're saying there's dimethyltryptamine in here. And, so the trial starts. Before the jury came in, the judge comes in, we all rose, and there's nobody in the court except me and my mother, and there's somebody way up in the back knitting, and I look back and I'm like, who's that? And it turns out to be the lawyer's wife, and very sweet. She was knitting and just always went with her husband to support him, And so our lawyers were down there. The judge came in, all these DEA guys with their boxes of dollies that they came in with are there. And dollies with these crazy boxes, they like confiscated papers, and they didn't even have that much stuff. They just had these empty boxes, show it like they had a bunch of stuff. It was like a show. So the judge said, "Well, I understand. I'm just going to paraphrase because this is 1991, right? But when I remember, the judge's like, okay, I understand. There's been an agreement, and you're going to plead guilty." So Rex was sitting, they called Rex, they swore him in, and I'm behind up in the seats with my mother. Nobody else in the court except Jim Lawson's wife. And they call Rex up to the stand, they swear him in, he has to go sit in that big chair, and he's sitting up there, and they're like, and the judge goes, so you're pleading guilty, are you pleading guilty? And Rex just was sitting there, and he just started like trying to talk, and he just started like crying, and all these DEA agents and customs agents and the prosecutors, they're like laughing and slapping their knees, and I'm looking at Rex crying, right? And I look at these guys crying, I stand up and I go down to the thing and I call my lawyer over and I said, could you please ask the judge to tell those guys to stop laughing, because this isn't funny. This is our life. This is not funny, And the judge is like looking at me, like he couldn't hear me, but he saw me talking and he probably got the gist, and he didn't get mad at me for standing up and saying that. It's like, and she, she said yes, and I think she went over and said, he's upset that they're laughing, And so he's like, the Judge Skinner said, Rex, okay, compose yourself. So, are you guilty? Are you pleading guilty? And he goes, well, I'm pleading. He said, do you plead guilty? And he said, I'm pleading guilty. And he goes, well, are you guilty? And he goes, well, did you know that there was something in there? And he goes, well, I don't know. I guess I knew there might be. I don't know. And then, it's amazing. Judge Skinner goes, he's a silence for a minute. And Judge Skinner goes, all of a sudden he goes, no. He goes, I'm not accepting your guilty plea. And then these guys were flipped out, and he goes, "What do you got?" And he goes to the Jeffrey, whatever his name was. I'll find his name out later. Jeffrey, the prosecutor. He goes, "What do you got?" And he goes, and he starts flubbing around, and he goes something like, he goes, "Well, the dimethyltryptamine, and they call this religion like Santo Daime, and it means dimethyltryptamine." And he goes, he looks over at Rex, he goes, "Is that what it means?" And Rex graduated from Oxford. He's a linguist, and he goes, "Well, actually, no, it's Portuguese, and it means give me, and he goes, Santo Daime means holy give me, it means asking, praying for help, holy prayer, like holy asking and give, please give me healing, He's sitting on the sand saying this to the judge, and then this guy's trying to say that Santo Daime means dimethyltryptamine, right? It's insane. The judge was upset. And then they go, and we have these articles, and there was like some article about it somewhere, and we have these pictures of a drug lab in Brazil. So they give the article and the picture book to the judge, and the judge is flipping through, and it's like a special ceremony in Brazil where all the women take the leaves that are going in the tea, and they're sitting around dressed all nice, and they're cleaning the leaves off, right? That's what the pictures were. And he's going, "This isn't you. Is this you?" He goes, "This isn't you. This isn't him." And he's flipping it, and Rex starts explaining, "Well, that's the ceremony where the women clean the leaves, and then they make the tea, and there's some other ones where they're putting the tea, and then they have a big altar with a cross." And with the pictures in the judge's hand, like the judge slammed him down, and he turned beet red, Judge Skinner. Like, the cartoons where there's steam coming off of your head? The guy turned beet red. He was really mad. And he called both lawyers over, and he goes, and the prosecutor, he said, I'm waiving the jury, and I'm finding them not guilty, And I heard this from up there, and then my lawyer comes over and called me down from the seat I was in down, and she said, "He's going to waive the jury, and he's going to find you both not guilty," And these guys were sitting there, like, they weren't laughing then. They were like, they were mad, but they were just flabbergasted, because federal court then and today, they have a 97% conviction rate. So 97% of everybody who has a federal charges gets found guilty, and they have to settle somehow and get found guilty. Only 3% of anybody charged with a federal crime is acquitted, is tried and found not guilty. 3%. That is very, very small, And we have, when that happened, we have this beautiful songs that we sing in the Santo Daime, and one of them says, all right, it goes, I raise up my banner, showing my worth, walking my spiritual path, the way the others went. Whoever wants to run, but I came to testify. They called me a liar, but my mother and my father were there. In that moment when the judge was saying, when Rex was talking and explaining, and then the judge said, I'm going to waive the jury and find them both not guilty, I was hearing the song, and I was seeing my mother, that mother that I felt. I was seeing her, feeling her in the courtroom, and I was hearing that song like it was full blast on 90, blasting into my head, whoever wants to run, I came to testify. They called me a liar, but my mother and my father are there. I felt that. It was so beautiful to feel that. And, I don't know. I'm grateful to Judge Skinner for having integrity. And I'm grateful to our lawyers. I'm grateful to Jim Lawson for representing Rex. Grateful to my lawyer, Lisa Smith, for representing me. I'm grateful to my mother, who was there with me, who I had a rocky relationship with. And we healed it. Another thing I was going to, I had meant to mention before I got into the case story was after I was having those experiences with Mother and the star and just getting committed, I was sitting in the works, in the ceremonies we were doing, asking, well, what do I do? While we were drinking the medicine and we're singing and we're having concentration moments and I'm praying, asking, what do I do? And the first thing I heard that Mother's voice tell me, the first thing I want you to do is to heal your relationship with your mother. I want you to work on forming a good relationship and heal, you know? So the next day after that ceremony, which was before May 21st, I called my mother up, you know, and I hadn't been talking to her a lot, but I just called her up. Mom, I just called you. She called me once in a while just to say hi, and we were a little bit distant, you know, but she was the one a lot that called me, and then I would be neglectful and not call her as much as she called me, you know. And I called Mom and I just wanted to say hi, Mom, and just talk to you, and just, you know, and started talking about things. And in that conversation, we had a long conversation, and she was talking about some family things and some things with her brothers that she was hurt about, and she started crying, and it was just really nice. And I started calling her, like, you know, every few days, you know, and at least every week, and visiting her and stuff, you know. And you know, I knew that's what the voice of the Divine Mother in the works. When I asked, what do I do? First thing is heal your relationship with your mother. So I did. I worked on that and got closer and closer to my mother. I became friends with my mother, and my mother opened up to me and started crying to me about things that she was hurt about, and, you know, sharing things, and we became friends in ways that we weren't before, you know. That was the first major direction I got from medicine. And then it said, and then the rest of your family, work on your family relationships and work on forgiveness. Over time, I learned about forgiveness, you know. One of the most profound experiences I had years later was being in ceremony in a church group we had in Washington, D.C., and feeling some of these traumatic memories open up in me, and seeing it like I was seeing inside of me, like flowers opening up with blood coming out of them, but then air getting on these flowers opening, these bloody flowers, and these flowers of blood with blood in them were old memories that were stored in me, you know. And then when the beautiful air got on them, and as time went on in the next few days and weeks, things healed, and I could like let things open up again and deal with things, you know, and let this heal with air on it and with awareness. And I understood from experiences like that this is what forgiveness is. Forgiveness isn't saying in your head or my head, oh, I forgive that or this. That's meaningless to me, you know. The thought of forgiveness, to say the words I forgive you, or to have a thought I forgive you, it's absolutely meaningless to me. But to really experience forgiveness is experiences like that inside, where those wounds open up and we allow forgiveness to come in, and then we forgive ourselves and we forgive others. And there's things I haven't forgiven in my life, and my first stepfather, I only have some forgiveness for him, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life working on forgiveness for this violence and this, you know, almost wanting to murder us all back in, and putting a knife to my mother's throat in front of children, and just being mean and violent like that. You know, it's like to children, you know. It's hard to forgive something like that, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing it, but with boundaries, because I actually don't have a relation with that person, and I don't intend to in this life. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life praying for to learn about forgiveness, and that wherever he goes when he leaves this world, that he can heal there. I have a strong belief that some people, you know, are come into this world just to be, they choose beforehand to be a part of things that aren't necessarily on the good side, you know. And I've read some old scriptures, they talk about sons of destruction, you know, And all of us are potentially sons and daughters of destruction. And we all have choice, but I also believe in lifetimes, and some of us, it takes lifetimes and lifetimes. So I'm always going to, people that I've been really upset with in this life, and even am today, I pray for them. When you're not going to get it, if you're not going to get it in this life, when you leave, wherever you go, please get it. I pray for you to be able to get it, so that these things don't get repeated by all of us. And my part too. It's just such a big subject, you know. I mean, if many cultures believe in past lives and reincarnation, and I've come to believe that that's true. You know, I don't know everything about it, and I don't pretend I do, but I have an inkling and a sense that we exist before we were here, and we'll exist after. And maybe I've done things in other lives that are terrible that I'm atoning for now, but I want to forgive myself. Then a lot of say too, it's all here, all that stuff can be true, but what about this life? The forgiveness of the things in this life, forgiveness of the wounds that are in us and of others, you know. So forgiveness is a big process. It's not just saying those words, I forgive you, or forgive me. It's bigger than that. And I implore and pray to the whole universe that all of us can learn what that means. All of us can have experiences like those flowers opening up, you know, because that's how we begin to learn what forgiveness is, you know, and that's the path, the universal path. Forgiveness, care, compassion, care for others, respect for the dignity of others, respect for our own dignity, respect for ourselves, care for everybody and everything, not just people. All living things, all cultures, all peoples, all mothers, and all children everywhere. That's how I see kind of a universal spirituality, if you will. And that's my religion. My religion is, it's not just one thing called this or that. It's you know, it's music, goodness, forgiveness, care, many things. So there's a lot more to the story, you know, but this is just a little bit of an introduction. Instead of writing it down, I'm approaching it this way with this videos like this, and we'll see how the story can get shared. I hope that people can know the history and know also how good and beneficial the use of plant medicines can be. And even without plant medicines, because you don't have to have plant medicines to do this kind of healing work, you know. But we shouldn't be arresting each other and persecuting each other. And it's important to respect these things. There's traditions where the people came from, and we shouldn't just take them and do like raves and, you know, just has to have respect, you know. And now in 2023, there's been ayahuasca ceremonies and mushroom ceremonies and frog toxin ceremonies. You know, there is a real legitimate traditional frog ceremony called kombu, and kombu is from frogs that come from the Amazon, where they kind of scrape a mucus off of them, and then they make a burn or an indentation in your skin and put it in so it gets into you, and it's like a vaccination. It's not like an intoxication, it's a vaccination that's got health benefits, you know. Then there's some other people who claim that there's toads or frogs that have DMT and they milk it, and there's supposed to be traditions, but from what I've heard, there really was never traditions. They just kind of made, people that are doing some of these DMT frog ceremonies are just claiming that there's traditions, and they're going around having these ceremonies, and maybe it's beneficial or not. I would personally never personally, I would never go to a ceremony with DMT toxin from a frog. I have taken the kombu vaccination, and I know that's very ancient, and I've had incredible beneficial experiences from that. And I'm grateful that I got to have that ancient technology that comes from the Amazon of the kombu vaccination. But I would never go with the frog DMT toxin. I don't believe that that's correct, and I would encourage people to think twice before you do things like that. Or take street drugs of DMT, because ayahuasca has many, many, many compounds in it, and we don't even understand the compounds. People say, oh, don't eat cheese or this or that because there's MAO inhibitors in ayahuasca, but the MAO-like molecules in ayahuasca have nothing to do with the toxins that were made here in the United States in the 50s and 60s and given to people for depression or different psychological conditions. They made these toxins in laboratories and gave them in very high amounts to people, and then when they ate cheese and there was some chemical, they had reactions. Some people even died. The molecules that are in DMT are nothing like those, and the MAO inhibitor like natural molecules. And there's so many things in ayahuasca that we don't even understand. And it isn't just DMT alone that is the spiritual evoking component. I've been in ceremonies where we have a bottle of ayahuasca and we have like 30 people and everybody has medicine and nothing happens. Nobody feels anything. And then we try to sing, we do this, and the thing ends, and the person leading it goes, yeah, and everybody, I didn't feel anything. Yeah, it's something, it was a night like that. Then a month or so later, we have the same exact bottle of medicine, and we take it again with another group of 30 people, we sing all their songs and do all of our ceremonial rituals, and everybody's on the floor having massive healings and incredible experiences and visions. It's the same medicine. It's the same from the same bottle. So it isn't just the medicine alone that makes these effects. It's the spiritual forces, it's the blessings of the spiritual beings that come and heal people. There's a lot of people who are trying to make newer versions of ayahuasca ceremonies where they integrate psychology with ayahuasca, and that's good to an extent. But there has to be some caution, because the old traditions are that the medicine heals, and the spiritual beings and the spirits and the mysterious powers heal. And then we, encountering these things, we learn how to heal ourselves. There's people with good intentions. They just want to be supportive of other people who just, I want to go do ayahuasca, and then they end up going without any preparation, and then they have all these experiences and then open up psychological traumas and things, and then there's nobody there to talk to, and they don't know what to do, there's no support. So there is something to be said about people learning that the hard way and then trying to make a supportive environment. But to me, I just want to reiterate and preach, the fact that the medicines are the healer. The spiritual beings and the spiritual forces and the mysterious powers, they're the healers. And we have to learn how to heal ourselves. So we can support each other, but we can't impose, And I was taught in these ceremonies, during a ceremony, don't impose on others, Like if somebody's going through something, the people who know how to be the quote-unquote guardians in Brazil, they don't impose themselves on others going through things. They're just there to make sure. You hand them a Kleenex, make sure you don't fall in the hole that you're getting well in, or if you go into the bathroom, you don't fall in or fall off the side of somewhere, or if you're laying there and need some water, or if you got well and you got to clean your bucket. People learn to just watch over without interfering. Unfortunately, when the medicine first came to this country, people were very taken by the medicine and, felt some commitment, but then all of a sudden became experts too quick before they learned a lot of things. And then we're in our ceremonies here in the United States, and people are trying to heal other people and interfering and telling people get up now and go over here and all that. there's a lot to learn, to be in a ceremony and support others around you, and then to be in a role of either facilitating or helping to watch out. There's a lot to learn. So now in 2023, there's been all kinds of groups and ceremonies and medicines, and also, frankly, a lot of it has become like business for some people. And some people who are like traveling around a lot, and not anchored in a family or a community, but traveling around everywhere. I was told by elders that I knew in the peyote church, those people that travel around, you got to watch out. Because where's their family and where's their community? How come they're traveling around and they're not with their family and community, And this one elder friend of mine who has been running ceremonies, medicine ceremonies for decades, and was actually at that Wounded Knee thing, a Native American Nahuatl person, that's my brother, was telling me, people just misuse these things a lot, and it's not, I lost my train of thought, so I'll just keep moving on to, I wanted to say, be careful where you go. There's a lot going on. I remember now, he told me that, those people who are traveling all around, like he said, I'm not a road man, a traveler. I'm a community person, My church is in my home. People come to my home where my wife is, and we have ceremonies for them, And they ask us, and we have a community and other married people and other healthy people. We get together and we pray. Somebody needs something, they sponsor a ceremony for their healing, and we support that. We don't travel around and try to, make money and chase women around and act like predators. Everywhere you go, everywhere, everything that human beings do, there's the good and the bad. So I just want to caution people, be careful where you go, and be careful for people who are financial or sexual or other predators around these medicines. Just be careful, and I hope and pray that we develop a strong body of good ceremonies and good ceremony people and groups, and that we can get together. I know there's groups that are like watchdog ayahuasca and medicine ceremony groups, and I'll probably network with some of them soon. I've known about a lot of these for years, but I've been in my own life on my own path and just kind of step back from the whole thing, not on the front lines. And maybe in these years, when I was in the prison cell and the peyote grandfather was telling me in 20 years and more, you're going to be a part of, when it's legalized and when we're going to have group centers all over the world, you're going to be a part of it, So I like to see healthy centers and healthy groups, and I'd like to always be a voice against predators and against people abusing these medicines and abusing others, just for money or for a loan, because there's money involved. It costs money for everything, so we've all got to contribute to something. But enough said for now. I'm going to leave this particular story alone for now, and there's more to come. Aho, thank you.